Welcome to the channel. I will split this into two parts. I will start with basically talking what the outcome is of gun control, and then the second part of what you actually have to go through to get a firearm. The outcome fundamentally is that there aren't a lot of guns about. There's a little quirk here. In the UK you allowed shotguns quite easily. It's not that complicated for like clay pigeon shooting, that sort of thing. Anything with a barrel shorter than 24 inches or with a magazine of more than 3 rounds in total, well, you're in Section 1s, and Section 1s are complicated. Now, fundamentally, no one here has a firearm. Police officers don't have a firearm. The guy having road rage behind you doesn't have a firearm. I don't have a firearm unless I'm traveling to the range or I'm traveling back from the range. Otherwise, I don't carry a gun. You know, it's not a thing in the UK. Nobody here really has firearms. The proportion of the population that has a Section 1 firearms license, which basically is anything other than a clay pigeon shooting shotgun, is only 0.2%. So you can look out down my street here. Nobody here has a firearms license. It's just not a thing. Very few people, only dedicated shooters or hunters, have licenses. And so fundamentally, you have a factor of 2 times more deaths here from people getting kicked or thrown by horses than you have from firearms. And that includes all those shotguns that this particular video isn't really about. The other side effect, which I really value, is that the shooters you do have, well, they're competent. Because you don't get to be a shooter here unless you have, 6 months training effectively, and you sit a written test, and you convince people that you're normal, and all the other stuff. And that basically means that as an example, here's your firing range. This is where you all stand and you shoot that way. Well, in the UK, at 200 mils or less than 12 degrees forward, there can be another guy there shooting, and you're literally shooting next to him. So it is not uncommon for you to be on, let's say, if I shoot from the 600 yard point, there might be someone 12 degrees off to the right shooting at 500 yards. Or at 300 yards. So you have rows and rows of shooters, all separated just by a few degrees. Yeah. So literally, if your gun strays like that, you can kill someone. But it doesn't happen because shooters here are competent. No danger area ranges where, I went to a shooting range, where was it, Las Vegas, and the whole thing is an armored box. So, if you have some guy blatting off effectively at the ceiling, well, that round isn't going to leave the range. That doesn't exist here in the UK. In the UK, if you shoot like that, where that round comes down, there might be a civilian standing. It's a reasonably densely populated country, and you can kill someone. So the shooters you do have tend to be really rather good. And realistically, if you don't hit your target twice, you shoot 600 yards, you have a target that's, 4 foot wide. If you don't hit that thing twice, well, then you're done shooting, and you're off to the zero range to re-zero your rifle. All that sounds reasonably good, but what's the downside? Well, the downside is fundamentally that it's quite a grind to get a firearms license. Here in the UK, we don't have an automatic entitlement for a firearms license. Now, that basically means that the only way you get your hands on a firearm is if you can show a purpose. And the purpose, they're really only, 3 to the top of my head. There's probably hunting, there's sports shooting, and there's probably some sort of animal dispatch. But that's about it. And if you want to go down the sports shooting side of things, well, then you basically have to demonstrate that you are already a sports shooter without owning your own gun. That means you attend a local gun club somewhere, maybe for 6 months. You get tuition, there's a coach there, you will have dozens of lessons on small bore as well as full bore. There will be a written test. You can then, at that stage, then effectively the club will support your application for a firearms license. That means you need 2 referees. You need to give the police access to your medical data. There needs to be an interview with a firearms inquiry officer who comes over. He makes sure that you have a safe that is adequate for the firearm that you want to have. He'll have a little chat with you. He makes sure you're not loopy. You're not talking about hearing voices or prepping for the end of the world. You wouldn't get a gun here if you talk about the end of the world. You really wouldn't. And you fundamentally have to show that you are a respectable human being who's, an upstanding member of society, more or less. So if you are in financial distress, for example, you're probably not going to get a firearms license. If you're renting your house or your property, it's already difficult whether your landlord will let you mount a screw in a wall. And so all those little things kind of exclude you. And even the two referees you have to have, you can't just use, any old mates. They have to be, yet again, at least somewhat upstanding members of societies. When I first applied for my ticket, the selection was rather short. I think it was like a priest was on the list, and God knows what, a doctor, and you get the drift. Professionals. It's loosened a little bit, but on my first application, I had a teacher who was, a next door neighbor who was one of my referees. And, that's really what you need. You need somebody that the police can't argue with. Because, if a teacher's happy for you to have a gun, well, then what are you going to say to that? There's really no comeback. And so you need to have some level of social connection. You can't be just a loner, And you then have to also pay for that, and you have to have a renewal every 5 years. And you also have a specification before you buy a firearm of what firearm you want to buy, and then that has to be cleared and then, written on your ticket, and then at that stage you can buy that particular gun. Well, that is in a nutshell in our system. So the system that we have is that very few people have a gun. The people that do have a gun don't carry them. And there are very few deaths involving firearms here in the UK. The downside is that if you want to be a shooter here, you have to jump through an awful lot of hoops, and you do have to accept visits and a certain level inspection from the government. Now that sounds bad, but looking from my side to what you've got going on in the States, it also doesn't look that good. Talking to some American friends, it strikes me, it always surprises me, because they have a great life. They live in a big house. They have wife, kids, everything's going great. They have a wonderful car. And they're socially plugged in, lots of friends, everything's great. And yet they sleep in a bed next to a firearm in case some lowlife breaks in who has nothing. And they're going to pit their life against that lowlife's life in a gunfight. That's insane. And we don't have that here. And that's perhaps worth an awful lot. So I will leave that with you, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.